All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in here. I'm with Chris Erickson, who's the president and CEO of Climate Earth. This is one of the leading providers of EPDs, which is going to be the discussion for today's very short presentation. What Chris is going to do is, and Chris, if you want to just very briefly give your 30 seconds on Climate Earth so people know where you're coming from, that would be great. But what we're going to get into in this short presentation is Chris is going to really describe for us what the modern contemporary environmental product declaration methodology and technology really looks like, and how it's increasingly become a very, very good fit for measuring the global warming potential of concrete and making comparisons between different products. So I'm going to let Chris go ahead and take the floor. Chris, again, tell us a little bit about Climate Earth, and then
sure.
Go ahead and proceed with your presentation.
We started Climate Earth about 10 years ago, actually in 2008, and the idea of Climate Earth was to take the discipline of life cycle assessment, which is very manual and labor intensive, and move towards automating those processes. And we work with large supply chain customers, Fortune 500s, and in the last 6 years, we've been focusing on EPDs for construction. At this point, I think we've had a lot of success in automating EPD production, especially for ready-mix block and precast concrete. We have over 150 plants up in operation that have generated well over 20,000 EPDs at this point. The system gives them complete control of the EPD process and gives them EPDs available instantly, allowing them to rapidly innovate. So that's Climate Earth. What I wanted to do today was address a little bit more about how customers are using EPDs in general and how they can be used in policy to support policy decisions for low carbon construction. And a lot of questions have come up, and I wanted to address the ones that are here on the PowerPoint slide that you're seeing. So let me just move right into that. But before I talk directly about those, I wanted to highlight how I think that, having worked with ready-mix concrete now for 6 years, that this is an amazing material. And it's amazing because of its flexibility, but also because it's the only core material amongst steel and wood where they already have technology to reduce the footprint by up to 50 or 60%. And we know technologies in the works like decarbonization technologies that could make them a carbon negative product. Plus, it's all natural. So with that little caveat up front, let me talk to you about what we can do with modern EPDs. First of all, there's always a lot of questions about variability. And it's important to note that EPDs are an international global standard. It's not something that was developed for LEED or USGBC. And there's rules that are in place for every product category, such as wood or concrete or Cheerios and cereal, on what we do as consultants to produce that EPD. The new rules that came out, which is called PCR, or product category rules, in February of this year, make the calculations of a concrete EPD highly comparable. Every single consultant, myself included, and all of the other EPD producers are required to use the same underlying default data to do calculations. By that I mean if an aggregate provider providing a ready-mix plant has 3/8 inch aggregate, we have to use the same factor, every one of us, to calculate the impact of a ton of that aggregate. In addition, we have to calculate variability that comes into play when industry average cement is used, which is usually 80% or so of the ready-mix concrete's impact. Does that make sense so far, Chris?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good. So let me move on. The other source of variability is ensuring that we're comparing exactly the same mix that meets all the same requirements. So for example, one 5,000 PSI or strength mix may be quite different in its ability to pump to the top of this building that's illustrated. Right. So we have different pumpability. But every project, the engineers predefine all the performance requirements for every concrete application that goes into that building. Mm-hmm. Floors may be 5,000 PSI with certain pumpability and certain set time. Columns must be much stronger. Walls might have different. but that's predefined for us. So it's a fairly straightforward matter then to take those specific mixes and compare their carbon footprint or their global warming potential. And that comparison is going to be completely fair and rational and can be a perfect selection criteria. It's an apples to apples comparison.
So just to clarify, in the context of like a bidding situation or procurement context, there's specifications for what the performance requirements are that the bidders know about, and they're able to meet those specifications and apply an EPD to that specific mix, to the mix that meets those specifications required. Okay, great.
In fact, it even goes further. They are liable that the mix that they bid meets those performance requirements.
Okay.
So not only are they required, they're liable. And given that, they have the flexibility then to design mixes that meet that performance requirement at the lowest possible carbon footprint.
Now, this would be a good point too, Chris, to point out, is this this level of, again, granularity, flexibility, is this how EPDs have evolved recently? Because I understand that there was some pushback in the state of California and maybe some other places a few years ago, that there was concerns about this very issue, about how many different varieties of mixes are for different purposes, and it might be too onerous to try to develop EPDs. What you're describing to me is that it sounds like we've overcome that through technology and automation. Can you just tell me about, is it fair to say those concerns from in California and other places were addressed?
So the EPD generator, which we've developed, and others I'm sure will develop like products soon, gives the content producer the ability to sit down at a web browser, enter a mix design, and instantly have returned a fully verified mix-specific EPD. So they're in complete control. They can design a mix for the floors for a particular project that's 5,000 PSI. They can design it, make sure it meets the requirements. They can look at the environmental impact. They can go back and tweak it until they get it just right. There's almost no additional cost to do that. And then they can submit their bid with a verified EPD that they may have just produced in the last hour or two. So this brings EPDs into the modern world. I mean, nobody today does accounting manually. Pretty much everything we do, shopping is online. This puts EPD production online in real time, like everything else we do in the modern world. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that's come up, Chris, is the cost of EPDs. And we decided we're just happy to share the costs that we charge. Obviously, these aren't committed long-term, but today our prices look like this. In an urban area, a 10-plant operation is a pretty substantial business, but very common. And to set up that database and system to generate their EPDs is about $24,700. Once that's done, it's about a 90-day process. They get 300 initial EPDs that are ready to go. Plus, they pay an annual subscription, which equates to $52 a month per plant. And that gives them unlimited new EPDs. Go to a browser, enter an EPD, and get an EPD instantly. Mm-hmm. Fully verified. So it transforms the EPD process from a very labor-intensive, slow process that takes months and costs thousands of dollars to something that's very, very cost-effective.
Chris, let me ask you a quick question here, because we did talk earlier before the presentation. You know, there are a lot of in New York City in particular, a lot of smaller, what we call mom and pop providers that might be a single plant operation. Is it possible for conceivably a group of smaller concrete providers to kind of come together potentially under a common, to be able to fit one of these plans that you have here?
Yes, so that would be quite possible, because each of them has a slightly different operating environment and slightly different ways to store data. The initial setup costs still might be, if, we had 3 small producers, each with 3-4 plants each, and they got together, the setup price would be slightly higher than the $24,000 here, because we'd have to deal with different incompatible data types. But it could be done, and we have talked with other government agencies who are considering sponsoring that kind of an effort to give the smaller producers a cost break.
Gotcha.
The other thing that we talked about is that a lot of these smaller producers, they don't bid on these large jobs. They just don't have the capacity to. So there's a question about where you maybe having a policy cutoff of 50 yards or 60 yards per job, where the global warming potential or carbon footprint reporting is not required or not part of the decision process.
Gotcha.
So that's pretty much all I had. I just wanted to make a final statement to be clear that that EPDs between products are definitely not comparable. You can't compare a wood EPD to a concrete EPD, but there are tools out there that are under development now to make that possible at the design level and later for architects and engineers. So the industry is moving in that direction.
Gotcha. And there's one other just piece, if we could quickly address, is obviously there's variation and technological change that's happening upstream among the component providers for concrete, namely aggregate and cement, of course. So you're seeing some plants that are high tech, highly efficient, that are experimenting with different production techniques, and they probably wouldn't want to opt for sort of the industry average type of EPD. So I believe what we were discussing before is that those component providers can also go ahead and get their EPDs through this same setup, and then be able to deliver to the concrete manufacturer very specific EPD numbers for their product. Is that correct?
That's correct. In fact, but an aggregate producer may not need an automated EPD system because there's only so many types of aggregate that they sell. But it would definitely be to their advantage to produce an EPD, because every one we've ever done is lower than the industry average. So it helps their customer be successful competing for these jobs. Same with cement, same with chemicals, additives that are used in ready mix. And the other thing that's nice about an automated system that we've been describing here is that every year we'll do a data refresh. So if a customer or if a supplier to a ready mix supply has a new material or a new EPD, we can incorporate that new data and refresh all of the EPDs for the ready mix provider that is buying from that more aggressive, more innovative material supplier.
Great. And again, you alluded to it before. I mean, this is your innovation at Climate Earth, but it sounds like what you're saying is that this is sort of the direction things are going in more broadly across your sector, this digitization. So
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I think everything we've done is aligned very much with where the world is going. We expect to have other companies automating EPDs. We expect to see ready mix producers asking their customers to make them more competitive in the low carbon construction market by asking them to make EPDs.
Gotcha. Great. Well, this was exactly what I was hoping for. This is a really good, quick and concise overview of where we are with EPDs. So really appreciate it, Chris. And I think you left your contact information there if anybody wants to reach out to you. So thanks, Chris.
Happy to talk to anybody about this.
Excellent.
Appreciate it.